Part of our program today is to make sure that we're prepared for the legislation conversations this afternoon. And so we're going to have Andy Olson with the Columbia Hospitality. He's been on the Long Range Funding Committee from the very beginning. He chairs that. And Becky Bogard with Bogard and Johnson, she's our legislative consultant and directs our legislative efforts here in Olympia and helps us get all organized so that we've got that united voice. So join me in welcoming Andy and Becky.
Thank you, Cheryl. We're going to kind of go back and forth a little bit on this presentation, hopefully to keep you engaged and interested. And I think what we'd like you to do as we go through the presentation, if you have questions, if you jot them down, and we will deal with them in the town hall meeting. Andy, as Cheryl stated, has been the chair of the Long-Term Funding Committee. I've worked closely with him to develop the proposal that has now been turned into legislation. We want to quickly review kind of how we got to where we are today. You may remember that in 2013 we were successful in getting some bridge funding from the legislature, and that enabled us to pay for postage so people didn't have to pay to get our visitor guides, and a number of other things that Cheryl noted this morning. Last year, and during 2013 and going forward, we were continuing to work on a proposal for a long-term funding program. But what we found is that we had some issues that we needed help in resolving. And so in 2014, we proposed legislation that set forward the principles of what we wanted to incorporate in our funding program and directed state government to help us, or certain parts of state government, to help us as we moved forward. It also required that we have a report to the legislature on what our proposal was by December 1st of 2014. We did submit that report, and I believe it's on the WTA website if you want to take a look at it. What we have proposed in legislation is, in fact, the implementation of that report. Briefly, we looked at that we believe it should be industry funded and industry governed. There should be dedicated and protected funds. We are not asking the industry to pay fees only for the legislature to take them, so we want them protected as much as possible. We want accountability for this program to be able to demonstrate that what you are paying for through your fees is actually helping the industry. And the legislation, as a result, proposes a creation of a pass-through. It's kind of an overview of what we're going to be going forward and explaining to you, hopefully very quickly and clearly, so that you will be able to talk with your legislators this afternoon. So Andy, there you go.
You know, Louise, I think earlier mentioned the Founding Five and the work that they did to establish the Washington Tourism Alliance. And I guess the only argument I have with them, or the only difficulty I have with them, is I really think they should have called it the Washington Tourism Federation. I like the acronym better. Give it a minute. Give it a minute. Picture the T-shirts.
Oh, God.
Tom? Inappropriate? I'm sorry. I didn't mean to start by being inappropriate. Many of you have seen the slides, the PowerPoints that Becky and I have done for 4 years. 4 years, 4 long years. We're going to do a PBS special documentary after this, you know, the evolution of a PowerPoint or the development of a funding model, something like that. It's a work in progress. But, you know, we've spent the better part of the last 4 years reviewing other states, looking at what we could do, talking to governmental officials, figuring out from industry what we should do, and what you're seeing today is kind of the culmination of all that. I mean, we've to get to where we are, we've looked at the different industry sectors, we've looked at their contribution to tourism, the tourism dollar spend, and we finally came up with a model probably 2 years ago, the initial model, and it's been a work in progress ever since. But it has never changed from being an industry-funded model. And as Becky said, you know, that's one of the principles that we wanted to make sure that we stuck with. The 5 major sectors, again, are lodging, food service, attractions and entertainment, retail and transportation, and all of them participating at different levels based on that allocation based on industry or tourism spend. As you know, we probably should have a budget for about $15 million. And every time Becky and I make these presentations to the House or to the Senate or to a committee, we tell them, you know, if you look at the map that you're going to see later in the PowerPoint, we shouldn't be at $7.5 million. We certainly shouldn't have been at, you know, under $2 million when the state office was open. But $7.5 million is attainable. $7.5 million is reasonable. It gives us the amount that we need for the spend that we need to market the state, but it's certainly far below where we should be and far above where we used to be. Now, the industry-funded fees are based on the different NACE codes, which I'll show you in just a moment. But this is the chart, and in previous presentations of this, it's been a lot shorter. But in talking with the different industry sectors, and you see the food service industry on the left, there are many more categories, but then again, everybody's included. One of the things when we started this process was to try and set it up so that the smallest of businesses weren't unduly burdened. We didn't want to have them participating if they really didn't have the margins, if they didn't have the gross revenues to do it. Even though they may benefit from it, we tried to be sensitive to that. But to the food service industry's credit, they wanted to make sure that everyone was participating, everyone was involved, even at the lowest levels, in this case at $25. And again, the one exception to the methodology here is the lodging industry, where it's 15 cents per occupied room. Now, we had two options. One was to get a list of businesses and to go out and do this by ourselves, to collect the money and assess or do the fees based on the same criteria that we've just shown you. But it didn't have any teeth. If we did that, it would essentially be a voluntary fund. And how do you market a state when you have a voluntary fund? You don't know if you're going to get $50 or $5 million. Unlikely at a voluntary fund you're going to get $5 million, but just on the off chance that you did, it doesn't work. So the other option was then to go through the government. And as adamant as we've been about being non-governmental, there are certain things we have to do just from a practical standpoint. And so we looked at the Secretary of State, the Department of Revenue, and using NACE codes. Now, the Department of Revenue, we assumed we would be able to do the lodging industry, and the Secretary of State, we would do the other industries, the Secretary of State being the group that does business licenses. And we assumed that the fees could come through with the registration of business licenses for those industries based on those NACE codes that would come through the Secretary of State. And here are the NACE codes, and I don't know if these are these in the packet, Louise? I'm not sure if the PowerPoint is in the packet, but certainly you can get a copy of it if you're interested in seeing what industries, what particular business sectors are in the specific NACE codes. But again, these are the businesses that are benefiting from tourism and participating in the industry spend. And here's the flow chart where it starts to get interesting, because now we have the Washington Tourism Marketing Authority rather than just the Washington Tourism Alliance.
So as you look over the legislation, which we will talk about in a little bit, you will note as you look through the legislation that the words Washington Tourism Alliance or Washington Tourism Federation never appear. And what does appear, though, is the Washington Tourism Marketing Authority. This is a governmental organization, and I want to explain why it's there and why it's important to understand that it is not the implementing organization, but it is essentially a pass-through. As Andy noted, we looked at how we collect these fees and determined that as a private entity, we would have no teeth in trying to get the fees from members of the tourism industry. So we looked at organizations that already have an existing collection system. In the case of the Secretary of State, they do annual corporate registrations. So if you're a corporation or a limited partnership and you fall in one of those NACE codes that you see, the idea is that you would also, at that time, pay your annual tourism fee. And so we've been talking with them, but once they start collecting it, those funds, at least for that moment, are public funds and need a public body to be able to make this legal. So the Tourism Marketing Authority is patterned after the electronic recycling law that has been on the books for a long time. It is a similar organization where fees are collected from the industry, and there is this pass-through organization that is governed primarily of people from the industry. So on the Tourism Marketing Authority, there will be representatives of the 5 sectors in proportion to what we anticipate they will be contributing. In addition to those members, there will also be the Secretary of State, because there needs to be a public official. And since the current Secretary of State happens to be a she will be part of this because we're trying to use her collection system. And the head of the Department of Revenue, because we are also using that collection system for lodging taxes. We've also, in the legislation, added as ex officio members 2 destination marketing organization representatives, since while certainly people in the industry in the different sectors have some expertise in marketing, the destination marketing organizations have a destination expertise, if you will, on how to market something greater than just a property or whatever. So if you see on this chart, and if you look in the law and you see the Washington Tourism Marketing Authority, again, that is not a new state tourism office. It is an entity to be a pass-through and to enter into a contract with, hopefully and presumably, the Washington Tourism Alliance, which you see on the bottom of this chart. And it is the Washington Tourism Alliance that will be the implementer of the program. It is the nonprofit that is really called out in the legislation. There's also another advantage of structuring this way, and that is that there are entities not included in the assessment model for a lot of reasons. So for instance, the tribes, who are very interested in tourism, have been serving on our board, have been participating in proposals for marketing plans and so forth, but they are separate nations, and they do not believe that the state can impose a fee on them. But they can, and we hope will, contribute to the Washington Tourism Alliance, which is not a governmental organization. Similarly, the ports, there's some federally regulated industries that are not included in the assessment models, cruise ships, airlines. We also have an exception for wineries because they are already assessed in the Wine Commission, but we anticipate the Wine Commission working with WTA and helping us financially in doing obviously some wine tourism marketing. But I wanted to make sure that there was a full explanation of this chart so that when you look at the legislation and you say to yourself, well, where is the WTA called out, you recognize that it is that entity noted in there that is the statewide nonprofit organization formed solely for the purpose of marketing the state of Washington to tourists. And that the Tourism Marketing Authority is not a tourism office, but a pass-through to get the funds to that organization, the WTA, that will implement it.
So you've already handled that slide. What am I going to do with that?
I don't know.
WTF once again. But the authority board is a pass-through. It's going through to the marketing organization, but one of the other aspects of the WTMA, the marketing authority, is that it will evaluate the efficacy of the program. I mean, there has to be, one of the basic principles that we started on is having an ROI for this program, and the WTMA will evaluate how the success of the WTA, or the entity that does the marketing. The use of the funds is tightly prescribed. We're not going to have the funds used for everything under the sun. People can change the definition of what marketing is and try to use that's not going to happen. We're not going to allow them to be swept, and there will be very tight administrative costs. We don't want to just create an entity for the sake of creating an entity. We want to make it for marketing the state. The sole purpose is to undertake that statewide marketing program, and the board has to reflect the sectors that are participating in it. And as Becky said, those that aren't paying the fees directly can pay directly to the WTA rather than the authority itself. Nothing. It's a working fund. There's going to be a minimal balance. For the WTMA, the monies that are coming through, although they are, again, one of the basic tenets of the original program was we can't have the funds swept. We can't have the funds being vulnerable. There's no way to do it when you're collecting them through a governmental agency. They're going to be somewhat vulnerable, and the purpose of the legislation and the purpose of all the work that Becky and Catherine have been doing has been to protect them and make sure that it's not going to happen. So it's a working fund. It's going to be going from Fund A or Account A into Account B, so there will be a minimal balance, and it's not going to be that attractive to sweep. It's not appropriated funds. They're not going to be in any budgets, and there's strong protection language in the statute. House Bill 1938, Becky's going to tell you about the sponsors and where we stand on it today.
So this, the tourism report and what we've just described has been captured in two bills. They are identical as introduced. House Bill 1938, which was introduced in the House and actually was heard earlier this week on Monday. We did have a really interesting advantage in the House is that earlier in the session, the chair of the Community Development, Housing and Tribal Affairs Committee, where this bill was referred, had asked us to come and talk about our report. And since the bill is kind of the embodiment of the report, the legislators already had they'd been schooled a little bit on where we were headed. This committee has been very favorable to tourism. We are in the process of making a few adjustments in the bill, and we expect that sometime next week, the bill will come out of that House committee. It will have to go to a fiscal committee because there is a small fiscal impact given that the Secretary of State and the Department of Revenue have to make some changes in their computer systems in order to collect these fees. But I will say that we have had some very favorable reception in the House. I want you to take a look at the people who co-sponsored this. The fact that your legislator's name might not be on this doesn't mean they don't support it. These just happen to be the people who signed on to the bill. And if you are going to see any of them, please thank them. In the Senate, the bill got introduced a little bit later. It was earlier this week on Tuesday, and it is Senate Bill 5916. Senator Sharon Brown, who is the prime sponsor, is the chair of the of the Senate Trade and Economic Development Committee. And we have been scheduled to have a hearing in her committee next Wednesday at 8 a.m. If any of you want to join us, we'd be happy to have the company. And in Olympia, it is a pretty small committee too. We are hopeful that we can keep this moving. All the legislators understand that there are issues with this legislation we need to continue to work with, and probably the biggest one is the details of the collection system so that the agencies are comfortable with it. Probably in a nutshell, the biggest difficulty we're having is that there are about 3 different systems we're looking at using, and because of the nature of state government computer systems, they don't all talk to one another. And one of them has information that the other one needs, and so we're trying to figure out how we bridge that gap. I'm confident that we'll get there, but we're probably not going to be there by this Friday. Again, you'll see a list of Senate co-sponsors. Then thank them if you are meeting with them. And if you have members that are on the committee, that particular committee, again, please ask them to support this, to keep the bill moving so that we can go forward. Because to me, I think the really important closing line with all of your members and all the people that you visit is that if they don't take action on this year, this is not a threat, but if they don't take action on this year, we have no substantial tourism marketing program. And we would be the only state without that. And I think it's very important that they realize that. So now I think, Cheryl, town hall time? Okay.
So we're going to call the executive committee up to join us at the table, and we've got a microphone on this end and a microphone on that end to answer any questions that you might have about the legislation. It's your chance to ask your executive committee of the WTA questions that you feel like you need clarification and that sort of thing. So please feel free to start asking questions, and I'll stand here and help recognize people as they come forward.
Check, check.
Let's not all rush up at once.
Check, check.
Are the microphones making you shy, or there's really no questions?
We see somebody moving.
Go ahead and come forward to one of the microphones so we can hear your question. Here we go. Okay, well, we're going to recognize this gentleman, and then we'll get yours. How's that? Go ahead.
Yeah, hi, my name is Rick Hughes, and I'm a San Juan County Council member. My wife and I also operate a retail pharmacy on Orcas Island. I'm here to support this bill, but I have a lot of questions about the funding mechanism. I didn't necessarily see in the retail category how you deal with pharmacies or grocery stores. You know, I'm not exactly that thrilled about a $600 fee on my business when the majority of my business is pharmaceutical sales. And when you take a gross application on that, but I also sell toys and wine, and you know, so I'm really curious where you deal with the bigger businesses that are in tourist destinations.
So let me take a crack at answering the question. We had to make some judgments. We couldn't. We think we based our decisions on NACE codes that are included in this program largely on who Dean Runyon looks at when he has determined the impacts of tourism. And in your case, pharmacies did not fall into one of those categories. So if you...
I support you 100%.
Yeah, I know, you and I've had this conversation
I know.
before. So I think that, you know, I recognize that you may sell things and that you sell things to tourists. So the way this program is structured is we're gonna rely on your good feelings about tourism to make a determination about, you know, what you like. You have the ability to contribute to the tourism marketing program through the WTA. You don't have to have a fee collected from the state. But you will note, and I think this is really important, we probably should have said this as we describe the program, that when we say the retail classification, we don't mean everybody. It is those retail entities that have been determined to really have be impacted by tourism.
One suggestion on the bill, I know this is late in the process, especially for the drop-in for the Senate, I think, but if you could include an opt-in for businesses that aren't on the list or required to do it, if they would consider some kind of a donation into the fund. You know, so I'm more than willing voluntarily to write a check to the board. It's the, you know, it's the B&O likeness of this that concerns me. So you may want to consider it like the state parks does with vehicle tabs.
One of the ideas that was put forward at one time was that we not just look at the tourism industry, but that we have kind of that same opt-in like state parks does. And I think we felt that other people, other industries and businesses would not really like to say, okay, I'm going to, you know, pay more to support the tourism industry. You can opt in by going directly to WTA.
Fair enough.
And I think that's the important thing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So you had your hand up. Go ahead.
My question is, so we are collecting money and it's going to the Secretary of State or that fund. But then we have those, like you said, the tribes who could donate that are going to the WTA. So now we have two funds. How are no, we don't. So are the tribes or whoever donating to where?
Well, the WTMA, the authority under the Secretary of State, that is a pass-through fund. It's just a vehicle through which the money from the fees coming in goes into a pot. It then immediately goes over to the WTA, and so it's just a pass-through, and then it goes to the WTA for the actual expenditures for the marketing of the state. And the tribes and the ports and the airlines and the cruise ships can't give to the WTMA, that governmental entity or the quasi-governmental entity, and instead they can give money, as with the pharmacies, and thank you very much for that, directly to the WTA. So it's really that pass-through, but it's a necessary evil, and emphasis on the evil. We understand the vulnerability of it, we understand the controversy related to it, but it really, again, as Becky has said multiple times, that method of collection, that ability to get the money in and then off to the group that's going to market it, has been very difficult, but with the help of a number of governmental agencies, the panel that Becky and Catherine put together for advice was absolutely stellar. It was amazing what we learned. We thought certain things going into this, and then what we learned about what we couldn't do and how we couldn't do it has been eye-opening, but it has saved a significant, if we had put this legislation through the way we thought it was going to be without the input of the different governmental agencies and individuals, we would have been dead in the water immediately. So it really, it's a little bit convoluted, but it makes more sense given the structure.
I just want to add programmatically, the other nice thing about, you've got our target of $7.5 million from the fees that would be collected by the state and then passed through. That we know it's still going to be just close to being competitive. We're not quite in the range where we really want to be yet. So those other dollars, we'll be very motivated to make sure that we're getting those voluntary collections as well, so that we can really leverage those resources and build a stronger and more competitive budget.
So I want to make one comment that kind of follow up on Andy about the assistance we had. The bill that was passed last year that you all worked on when you were here last year was really critical in getting representatives from various state agencies and the legislature to come and work with us. And while they told us what they thought we probably couldn't do, they were problem solvers. And so they helped us determine what we could do and how we could, given the principles that we have, make this work. And let me give you an example. To all of you, I think the issue of fund protection is very critical, and there is language in the bill to do that to the maximum extent possible. But I will tell you the thing that was most comforting to me was the description from some of the staff that basically helps legislators find funds to sweep. But they said, you know, what we look for is we look at whether there's a balance at the beginning and how big a balance there is at the end. And if it's not very big or bigger, it means it's a working fund. So the money's coming in, the money's going out, we're not touching those. An example of that are commodity commissions. I do not believe the legislature has ever swept the commodity commission. We are sort of like that. We're not exactly like a commodity commission, but we have the same money coming in, money going out for an operations program, and at the end of the biennium, there's not much there because you're starting again on another cycle. So I was very grateful for the help of these folks, and they continue to help us. We continue to have some issues to work out, but they continue to help us problem solve as we try to get this through into a workable format.
Great. John?
I'm going to jump in as a board member. While this is not necessarily a decision that's been made, but when we look at these non-assessed sectors like ports, wineries, tribes, et cetera, some of the opportunities might mirror what they're doing at Brand USA with cooperative marketing opportunities. Much of what you saw there could be a model we would look at as an organization, how they can participate in writing a check from any other kind of store that's not participating would be great, but we want to also give value to those participants, and I would envision that would be a route we would look at is cooperative opportunities for those entities to participate. My question is in regards to, or might be good for clarification for the folks in regards to the research component of the authority. What are some of the things we're looking at? And clarification, is it research on market or is it research on the entity and what those ROIs and, you know, just thoughts about that so people would understand that a little?
It's really research on the effectiveness of the marketing program. We are not looking at the Tourism Marketing Authority to tell the WTA how to do their job, but we are looking at the authority to determine whether or not it's effective. And I think some of that is something, what we'd envisioned at least, is something akin to the Dean Runyon study, like, you know, has tourism grown? If so, in what sectors? and so forth. I think the marketing authority would be open to ideas about how best to evaluate the effectiveness of the program, and there will be people with some expertise on that group.
And as we've talked about in previous summits, when you come out of a recession, people say, well, why do we need to market the state? Because, things are going well. Hotel occupancies are up, rates are up, the economy's doing well. Apparently, we don't need to market the state. But the issue is not just necessarily that incremental change, but it's our market share. And so when we start to look at the metrics as the authority, when we start to look at the metrics that are going to come from Dean Runyon and some other research, we can get a better sense as to whether or not we're slipping in our position, whether or not we're not only gaining in gross dollars, but also in our market share. We're taking back some of what Montana and Idaho and British Columbia and Oregon have taken from us since we've shut down our budget. So it's a combination, and as Becky said, we're open. It's not like we've established the metrics and we've said, well, this is going to be success and this is failure and this is mediocre. But what we need to do is figure out what those metrics are, and they're going to relate to, visitor spend, share within the competitive market, and things like that.
And there are best practices that we can look at from other states, what Brand USA, what Chris went over with some of their benchmarks and how they're measured and how they report out on success and then set those goals for the next period. That's the kind of thing that we'll be looking at. So go ahead with your question. Thank you.
Sure. Steve Shively with Jefferson County Tourism. I thank you guys very much for getting us to this point and all the hard work and finding the mechanisms to make it happen. At this early yes, thank you very much for the good effort. Is there any understanding at this point, as far as the bills that have landed, the uniqueness of this initiative compared to the possibility that there's just scope creep or mission creep, where there's possibly other sectors and other industries that are finding mechanisms, creative, and finding different ways so that the legislators are getting assailed from a variety of these kind of bills and these kind of unique out-of-the-box funding mechanisms. Is any of that going on, or is there a count?
I haven't really seen any of that. There are certainly other proposals around for funding programs, but most people still look to the general fund. And I think that this industry has made a determination that we'd had general fund support for a while, and it was a pittance, and it's not worth fighting to be number 49 to get your $2 million out of the general fund. So I haven't seen other industries do it. We've talked to the Association of Washington Business about this to see if they had any concerns about it, and they have been neutral on this position. If the industry wants to step forward and do this, it's okay with them. But I haven't seen other industries necessarily looking at this kind of a model. Most industries look at, a tax break of some sort or something like that, and that is not what we're doing.
Other questions? Yes, go ahead.
What's to prevent some clever people from controlling the WTMA to the detriment of the people who contribute to the fund? What I'm thinking particularly of is the issue of new funding. Well, if you bump everybody's charge a bit, then that's no longer working money, that's new money. And so what's to prevent the legislature from bumping the fees and taking the money?
Pretty simple. The fees are put in statute. They'd have to change the law.
So he's asking what would keep the WTMA from becoming, from mission creep or from doing something else or changing the fees and that sort of thing. And as Becky was addressing, it's in the statute.
There's also language that says these fees are solely for tourism marketing. And there is a provision that allows the authority to suspend the fees if they're not being used for that.
Can you come to the microphone so everybody can hear you, please? Thank you.
Hi. My name is Lloyd Moore with the Captain Woodby Inn on Woodby Island. So my question, I guess, as a follow-up to that is, who controls this quasi-government.
WTMA.
Yeah, and how do you maintain control?
So the number of, I think there are 13 on this board, and of the 13, I just have to do some quick calculation. 9 of them are from the sectors that have fees. That's a big majority of 13. And assuming they all stick together, I think that's one of the biggest preventative measures. 2 of the others on the board are destination marketing organizations aligned with those sectors that are subject to fees. So I think the language in the bill and the fact that we have this group that has very specific authority to do 2 things. One is to enter into a contract with a statewide organization for marketing tourism. And the second is to evaluate the impact of those marketing efforts. That's all they're supposed to do. And they are not, I mean, they might need 1 or 2 staff people, but once a program gets up and running, I don't think they even need anybody full-time. So I think that's really the protection. They do not have the authority to implement this statewide marketing program. Does that make sense?
And from a lodging perspective, since Captain Whidbey, basically when we came into this as an industry, when I started with this initiative, I was the chair of the Lodging Association, and I took that pretty seriously because, not that I wouldn't have taken it seriously anyway, but the lodging industry has been the go-to source for funding in this state for many different things over many different years. And I think the charge that I had when I came to the Washington Tourism Alliance was make it broad-based, make sure that it is funded by a number of those industries or those sectors within the industry that are impacted by tourism, not just lodging, and make sure that there's representation and control over the decisions based on those that are putting the money in. So you're not just putting it in and then allowing others to dictate what happens to your fate. And that has been, I think, universally accepted. All the different sectors have said, yes, we're going to step up and not make this just a lodging initiative. So I'm very sensitive to what you're asking and what we've tried to do going through this. And I think that there have been compromises along the way, but not to the point where we're compromising what our basic principles were going in.
And I would just add that our advocacy role as the Washington Tourism Alliance and with David Blanford and the team of volunteers right now, of people that are in PR and communications, our advocacy role is going to have to continue because this bill passes, we've got a transition to get through, we've got all of those different mechanics of continuing process, and to know that it's not just, okay, it's done and we walk away. We've got to stay engaged and stay involved and make sure that something doesn't go wonky in the future and that we're not caught off guard. So that advocacy role that we all play is not going to go silent when this passes. You had a question, thank you.
I do. Hello, I'm Craig Jager, owner-operator of a bed and breakfast up on the Olympic Peninsula. Definitely want to echo the thank you for all the hard, amazing, critical work up to this point, so thank you. My question is just a clarification, I believe, on the funding mechanism for the WTMA. Just to make sure, one of the compelling things I think that we heard this morning and through the work has been, zero or very limited government funding throughout the other organizations in our country. And that's a compelling thing to say that there's, we're not looking at more government funding. It's private sector funded. The WTMA, however, is this government entity. What is the funding mechanism? Does it come out of the collected funds of the WTA, or is it coming from some state money somewhere?
Well, first of all, the people that serve on the WTMA are not compensated except for expenses in going to meetings. So that's number one. It is not anything like a full-time job. We would expect some of you to be members of the WTMA. The idea is that the different sectors would, and the organizations representing those sectors would submit nominations. So that's kind of a no-cost thing, except for minimal expenses. Again, there may be some minimal staff, And that would come out of the funds that are collected. But there's a thing in Olympia called fiscal notes, and they kind of try to figure out how much is this going to cost. The fiscal notes to date, I think we had a $61,000 fiscal note from the Department of Revenue, and that's a cost of changing their system. The fiscal note from the Secretary of State was higher, but in conversations with them, they recognized that they had overstated their costs. And they also recognized that there might be some startup costs, but that once the contract was let, a lot of those costs go away. But that would have to come from the $7.5 million.
And I guess one of the things you said was, how is that office or that department going to be funded? And it's important to remember that the WTMA, the authority, whatever you want to call it, is a pass-through. The collection methodology requires that we have the WTMA rather than it going straight through to the WTA. And it wasn't meant to be alphabet soup, but simply to create an acceptable vehicle through which to get the funds into the government and then eventually to that marketing entity. So as Becky's described it, I mean, it's meant to be minimally administrative, minimally obtrusive. It's a pass-through. But again, it's important that it has industry representation, because that's kind of our watchdog or our pass-through group to make sure that those funds, number one, come in and then out.
The biggest decision they have to make is who to contract with for the statewide tourism marketing program. But I think there is, we can't name the WTA in the legislation, but it is described. And there is a clause that if there's only one potential contractor, that they can sole source it. So we've tried to cut down on as much administrative expense as we can. Cheryl, I have one thing.
Go ahead.
If nobody's going to ask this question, I'm going to make a comment about it. Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Make a comment first.
Okay, so some legislators, particularly from east of the mountains, have been concerned about representation in this program. And my response to them, or our response, has been that you only need to look at the WTA board, which is the implementing organization, to see that we have a number of representatives from east of the mountains, and that it is that board, more so even than the WTMA board, where it is important to have the statewide representation. All of you know that our bylaws call for regional representation. We've added some slots if we need to beef up some areas. It calls for representations from the sectors. It calls for big and small. And so it is a very diverse board that way. And if you get asked that question, I think that's the answer, as opposed to taking this WTMA, which actually does have some language attached to it describing geographical diversity. It's not as prescriptive, saying you have to have X number from so-and-so. But I think the issue is that it's the implementer where we need to really look at that diversity, and we have that in our bylaws.
Great, thank you for that clarification. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Todd Ellsworth. I'm with Recreation Northwest out of Bellingham in the 42nd District, and looking forward to going and talk to the legislators. Curious what the opposition is for this. It seems like this makes sense and we should just do it. But what are we up against? If you could speak to that to understand if there is other side, and thank you.
To date, we haven't had big opposition at all from any folks that have testified. There have been some concerns expressed. We're dealing with an issue with state parks and how they structure, how they charge for lodging, and they would be subject to the 15-cent per occupied room night fee for their campsites and so forth, and we're trying to work through that. At one point, the Fairs Association, and I know that this in fact impacted Whatcom County, had asked that we adjust their formula somewhat. They decided just yesterday that it wasn't worth that effort, and they're fully on board with the program now. We have not, the Restaurant Association has voted support, so is the Lodging Association. Some of the other organizations that are looking at this include the Retail Association. We've been working with them over the course of developing this legislation so that they understand that we're not going after all retailers. Not all retailers are subject to I used the T word. Don't use the T word this afternoon. It's unfortunately the F word, the fee word. So, sorry. This has been a trying experience at various times, but I think that they now understand the targeted, the NACE codes that we're looking at, and hopefully their board will either be neutral or supportive, and they will take that action. I don't know, I think it's next week they meet. So the attractions are in a similar situation. There's a Puget Sound Attractions Council that is looking at the legislation right now, but it was kind of nice. It was kind of like a little bit of a love fest. On Monday, the ports came and testified in support of it. The outdoor recreation people want some recognition in the bill that outdoor recreation is a very important part of the tourism sector, and we are working with them on some language to implement that thought. I have a meeting tomorrow with a number of them from it's an outdoor recreation coalition to kind of talk through some of their questions about the bill. But nobody's signed. I don't know how many of you know the process at hearings, but when you go into a hearing, you sign in and you say whether you're pro or con, and whether you want to testify or whether you don't want to testify. And no one has signed in con. A couple people signed in with concerns, and those are the fairs and the parks. And as I said, we're trying to work through those. But so far, it's I keep thinking the boom is going to drop at some point. But we've been fortunate. I think there is still some concern among the agencies on how the collection system will operate. And again, we continue to work with them on that.
And the devil's in the details, but it's interesting. I talked to the parks representative after the Monday hearing, and I guess I beat them up a little bit about their methodology in collecting, how they set their fees for their spaces and all that, and they didn't want to pay the 15 cents and yada, yada, yada. And I don't know if I beat him up around the head and shoulders or what, but eventually he stopped me and said, but I spoke in favor of it. So it's although they are having issues, or there are some it's really in the details, and I think they'll get worked out.
And sometimes it's a question, it's not an issue. I know our legislators ask me, where are the sectors? Are they with you? Have you been working with them? And so when we describe the process with all the state and regional meetings where we've gone around with the initial funding model, and then we tweaked it, and then we sent it again, and then we most recently went out after the report was completed. And that process of bringing everybody here, it doesn't guarantee that everybody in Washington would be affected by this, understands it, but they've had the opportunity because we've had a really broad and inclusive campaign to bring people to the conversation. And then we've been responsive and working with them to address the issues. And that's how you saw the rates today are so different, because the restaurants said, we want to do it this way, and we listened and we put that in. So it's a very inclusive process, and that matters a lot.
I just have a question on what Outdoor Recreation Coalition, or you had referenced that. Who are you referring to in that?
The Outdoor Recreation Coalition is kind of an informal group of people in Olympia who lobby on different outdoor recreation issues. I don't know what the Big Ten is, so I guess it's different.
Sharon?
Sharon Linton from Visit Bellevue. We have a couple shopping areas in Bellevue, and so I'm curious, how are they assessed at the mall level versus the individual retailers?
It's the individual retailers.
Okay, so the entity like Bellevue Square would not be assessed?
I don't believe they fall in a NACE code that is assessed.
Okay.
Right.
Our hope is that they'll be co-op partners and contribute, though, at the mall level, because many of them do pool their marketing dollars for stuff like that. Yes, go ahead.
Hi, Chris Copacino with Copacino Fujikato. Two questions, one more kind of near term, one more looking ahead. The first question is, as a bill becomes a law, what does a timeline look like for when those working dollars start to happen, given the process that needs to happen with computer systems and just ironing out those logistics?
So the way the legislation is currently written, it becomes effective July 1, which is the next biennium, when the next biennium begins. We continue to work with some of the, particularly the Department of Revenue and the Secretary of State, to see how fast we can get this up and implemented, and I don't really have an answer to that right now. I have said, Andy and I have both said in hearings in response to something similar, is that we want to get this moving as fast as we can. So the good news is, with respect to corporate registrations and LLCs through the Secretary of State's office, that is an annual event and it is done on a rolling basis. So it's not like they're all July 1, and if we miss the July 1 date, we're dead in the water for a year. So there are times of the year that they may be a little more robust, like in January, but for the most part, they roll through the year. The Department of Revenue, as soon as they get their system accommodated to the 15 cents a night charge, can start collecting. And since we've been talking to them through this process, they've been thinking about that. We have also said to the legislature, we're not sure of the answer to your question right now, and we may need to ask them for some funding, either in another bridge funding or a loan that over the course of the program we would pay back.
Thank you. One other question. I think it's amazing to hear that without this bill passing, that Washington might be the only state without a state tourism fund, and that's shocking. And I think that's why we're all here today. But we also have to walk before we run. And Andy, you said that potentially the budget could look like $15 million, or should look like $15 million. Is there a strategic plan looking forward once this initial budget is passed to see how the proof of concept can work, looking ahead to be able to expand and continue to compete on the state level?
So if you're, let me see if I'm understanding your question. So if you're asking how do we think the fund might grow, we've discussed with the Long-Term Funding Committee and others whether we wanted to put an escalation factor on the fees, and decided that we did not want to do that right now. That what we're really looking at is, if this program is successful, there will be organic growth. So your business right now may be making $1 million, but if this works, you may grow and bump up to the next level of fees, and that's how we will get our growth. Now, that's a concept we have to prove, but we thought that for starting out, that was the best way to approach it.
Thank you.
Idaho does theirs that way. I'm sorry, Andy.
I was saying that's where the idea of the WTMA evaluating the success of it and watching the growth too.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Bruce Bodka from the Department of Fish and Wildlife. I don't have a question, but there was a discussion of an outdoor coalition. We participate in the Big Tent Outdoor Coalition, which I believe is the organization that is interacting on this bill. And there's some really obvious connections that make an alliance and mutual support important. So I guess I'd encourage everybody to, at home or by electronic means, reach out to the outdoor recreation sector in the communities, because we definitely have a mutual interest in this.
Are you coming to that meeting tomorrow?
Excuse me?
Are you coming to the meeting tomorrow?
The meeting isn't immediately on my calendar, but I just might.
10:30, the Association of Washington Cities.
Thank you. And the other point, speaking of meetings, that outdoor coalition is having its legislative day in a couple of weeks. I believe the date is the 24th. So the timing of this might be pretty helpful.
That's great. Thank you. Christina?
Just perhaps it would help if you outlined a roadmap of how these bills are going to roll through after we do our advocacy with our legislators today. How will they go through the various committees, through the House, through the Senate? What do you anticipate? And after we leave today, how can all of us continue to help move this forward?
So I'm going to take each house separately because they have some separate processes. We anticipate this bill coming out of the House Community Development, Housing and Tribal Affairs Committee either Tuesday or Wednesday of next week. In the House, they tend to refer anything with a certain level of fiscal impact to either the Finance Committee or the Appropriations Committee, and they also refer to the Finance Committee almost anything with fees in it. So I believe that this bill will go to the Finance Committee, and let me describe some deadlines that we're looking at. The bill needs to be out of what's called the Substantive Committee of the House of Origin, which Community Development is, by the close of business that's coming, a week from this coming Friday. And then it has another week to get through the Fiscal Committee, if it's not related to the budget. I will tell you, in my experience, if we don't hit that deadline, there's a lot of ways to make this necessary to implement the budget. So while I'd like to meet that deadline, I'm not going to tell anybody that it's dead if we don't meet it. So that's kind of the House procedure. So the key committees there are Community Development and House Finance. So if any of you have members on any of those committees, please make sure that you remind them they'll be considering this. In the Senate, we are coming before the Trade and Economic Development Committee, and the Senate may not refer it to the Senate Ways and Means Committee. They haven't made that decision yet. They may take it straight to the Senate floor. I think the way we keep up with that, alerts through Louise.
Yes.
So all of you are on mailing lists. Look for those exclamation point emails and things that you need to respond to. I will tell you that we did some of that for the hearing this past week in the Community Development Committee, and the chair commented at the beginning of the hearing that she didn't know about everybody else, but she'd had a whole lot of letters and calls about this, and not one of them was in opposition. So we need you guys to keep that up, because that is so important to, legislators have, already I think we've had 2,000 bills introduced. They can't read everything. They hear from all their constituents that everybody's for it. That makes it a lot easier for them to just go forward and vote yes.
Great. Well, I'm going to thank the Executive Committee and Becky. Oh, I'm sorry. One more, and then we're going to get to Catherine. Go ahead.
Ron Peck from Walla Walla. We've heard a lot of discussion, and thank you for bringing Chris Thompson here with Brandy Ursay. Talk about Division of Tourism's Idaho, Oregon, a Division of Tourism. We've heard a lot of talk about a self-funded organization that we as a private sector businesses are driving it that way. If we're on the Hill and we get questions about, well, we wanted to build or create another government entity, another division of tourism, can you all just maybe address what that answer should be?
So my answer to that is that because of the collection mechanism, we had to create the Tourism Marketing Authority, but that we believe strongly this should be an industry-run, industry-implemented effort, especially since it's the industry paying the fees. So in its purest form, we're not creating a new tourism office, but we are creating a public-private partnership statewide tourism marketing effort. And I think that's the answer that you need to give them. You will find legislators, this happens all the time, they'll fall into, well, is this just creating a new state tourism office? And I think they need to understand the uniqueness of what we're proposing and going forward with.
Great. Well, thank you for your questions. Thank you to the Executive Committee and Becky and Louise. Catherine Hendrick is going to come out and walk through the advocacy with the Afternoon on the Hill information for us. And let me advance the slide. Oops, there you go.
Okay. So sorry, but you still get me for a couple more minutes. I think most of you know Catherine Hendrick, who is like my right arm, my right leg. I couldn't get things done without her. And we really didn't coordinate blue today, but nonetheless, here we are. So we want to walk through with you kind of what's going to be happening the day on the Hill. And I think I wanted to put this slide up first because this is the reminder to you and to your legislators about why we need to undertake this effort. And we, as we've said all along, we are doing this in a modest, starting up way. And you look at these numbers and you see that compared to our peers, we're going to be better off. and we will be in the game. But, this is why we need to do this, because right now it's so minimal for us. The ask is to get your legislators to commit to supporting the bill and keeping it moving. It is what's called a work in progress, but it will get there by the final day. The one thing I didn't mention is just a timeline of, in addition to these cutoffs. Once the cutoffs are over from the one bill goes to the other house, you kind of repeat the process. The end game this year, I think the last day of the legislature is the last Sunday in April, which is April 27th, I think, 26th, 27th. And that is when the regular session ends. If we go into special session, and this is considered budget, and it's not passed, I think we can make it budget related. I believe this is part of an end game, either at the end of April or the end of whenever they get out of here. June, that's like wash your mouth out. I mean, George, I love Olympia, but I really want to go home. Again, it's asking them to keep this moving, to support this bill. We've kind of talked about this a little bit in terms of the questions you might get asked. This is a fee. It's not a tax, it's a flat fee, and it's a sliding scale based on your adjusted gross revenues, with the exception of the hotels, which is a 15 cent a night, much like your TPAs, 15 cent a night per occupied, or 15 cent per occupied room. We've talked about the supporters, the Lodging Association, the Restaurant Association, lots of businesses, the destination marketing organizations, and many, many others around the state. We need this enacted because of that collection issue and our ability to make sure that we have an assured fund so that we can structure a marketing program. And if you don't know the answer to the question, it's okay to say you don't know. You all have evaluation forms in your folders, and I think there's a room for you to come to around 4:30, so you can tell us what those questions are, and it's my job and Catherine's job to get back to those legislators. So I'm now going to turn it over to Catherine to talk about all the details getting you through the day.
Okay, in your packets you have the schedules, the campus map, and the legislative feedback form, the bill, and the handouts that you'll be giving to legislators. I want to go over the schedule with you. You'll see that you have appointments made. I've grouped you into your legislative district, or by regions with your legislative districts. You'll notice on your name tags that you have a number, and that is your legislative district. So you'll see that we've grouped you in with your regions, and your legislative districts are listed there. Most of you know the folks in your regions that you're grouped with. If you don't, please feel free to come out and see me at the registration desk, and I can help you group you with your other people. You'll also notice that there's two columns here. We've got the meeting schedule side and the WTA team side. Your legislators are on the left side in their legislative district, in their room, and we've organized it by time. And then on the other side, on the right side there, are the attendees with your legislative districts and who you're with. If you, I've also highlighted, we've highlighted the WTA board members on the right-hand side, and then you'll see as you go through the packet that legislators who sponsored the bill are highlighted as well. And so you want to make sure that you thank them when you're meeting with them for that. If you live in one of the legislative districts that you're assigned to, but you work in another one, please be sure to make sure that you go to the legislative district that you live in. And if you have time, if there's no conflict with the other appointments, then you can go to the one that you work in as well. And so, for example, I was going to show that this is from last year. because we hadn't completed this until very recently. But last year we had Angie Michael in the 32nd Legislative District. Oops, excuse me. And so she worked in the 32nd and she lived in the 21st. So just make sure that you go to both if you can, and then, but make sure you go to your legislative district, your home legislative district, sorry. We also need to make sure that at least one person attends each meeting. So when you're getting together and conferring with your group, please make sure that you have at least one of you going to each meeting. One of you should take the lead in discussing the issue with the legislator. You all want to introduce yourselves and who you're with and where you're from. You want to try to highlight the primary reasons why having this program in place will make a big difference for the legislators' community. And another thing is, don't be surprised if you have to meet with staff. The staff a lot of legislators are in committee hearings during this time, and some staff will take you down and pull the legislator out of the committee and have you meet with them there. Other times you'll be meeting with the staff, which is just as important because they are the ones that oftentimes track the bills and keep records, and they're the ones you'll talk to when you call in outside of the session as well. Also want to review the Capitol Campus map with you. You have this in your packet. This shows where you are now. I do want to highlight that a lot of you have meetings that start at 12:45 or 1 o'clock, so please be mindful of that. I don't know if you're walking to the Capitol or catching a shuttle, but it's about a 15-minute walk to the Capitol campus from here. And then you also have this on the other side of the map, and I have this noted on your appointment schedules. At the top, you'll see that when you're meeting in your room meetings, you'll see it says JAC, LEDGE, JLOB, or IMB. And so the LEDGE stands for the Legislative Building and the Capitol Building. JAC stands for the John A. Sherberg Building, and that's also where we're going to be having our debriefing in the hearing room 3, and that's open from 4:30 to 5 o'clock. You can come in anytime and turn in your evaluation forms and debrief with us. The IMB building is the Irv Newhouse building. Oh, one more thing. The Sherberg building is also referred to as the Senate building. That's where a lot of the Senate Democrats are housed. The IMB building is where the Senate Republicans are housed, and that's the Irv Newhouse building. The JLOB stands for John L. O'Brien, and that is where the House members are housed. Also in the legislative building are some House and Senate members. On the left-hand side is the House members, and on the right-hand side are the Senate members when you go in. But there's always security staff around, and you can ask anybody if you have any questions. Everyone's very helpful around there. There's cafeteria in the Pritchard building. And then there's also a cafeteria in the legislative building, the Capitol building. And then when we meet for the reception at 5:30, you'll want to enter at that entrance in the governor's mansion. Oh, there's also a gift center in the Capitol building. It is fantastic. You need to go in there. You need to see what they have, and you need to tell them that you have something look around. If they don't have something of yours, talk to them and see if you can get it in there, because they have just about everything around. Fantastic place. I don't know, I wasn't in here earlier. Did George talk about the Dash shuttle? Okay. There's a fantastic shuttle that runs up and down Capitol Way, and delivers you to the Capitol every 15 minutes, 10, 15 minutes. There are pamphlets outside the door on a table across from the registration table on the Dash Shuttle, and I would encourage you to use it. If you have, some of you have really large gaps in between your meetings, or you don't have a meeting until 3 o'clock, get on the Dash and go up and down Capitol. There's fabulous places to eat and shop. Be a tourist. Spend money in Olympia. Thumbs up. So your legislative discussion recap, everybody has one of these in their folder, so please fill it out and bring that back to us. Kind of went over the other things to do. You can go to the cafeteria, you can visit committees, feel free to go into committee hearings, see what's on their agenda, and watch. There could be some great things going on. Go by, and if you don't have a meeting set with your legislator, feel free to stop by their office, meet their legislative assistant, introduce yourself, leave the handouts. Like I said, that could be just as important as meeting with the legislator themselves. And also, there's a tour of the Capitol building every hour on the second floor entrance of the legislative building. So feel free to do that as well. Governor's reception, or the reception at the governor's residence tonight at 5:30. Everybody must be registered. If you have not given us your name and you plan to go, if you have not registered, but you've planned to go, please do check in with us at the registration table. And be sure to bring your photo ID. You must have that in order to get in. And then I just need to very quickly go over a couple of last minute changes. As I was standing back there, I'm still getting notices from legislators in their offices changing some appointments. So first thing though, is Chet Ross out there? Chet, no, okay. For those of you in the group with San Juan, Skagit, and Whatcom County, 42nd, you're meeting with rankers at 3 o'clock. And those of you with the Snohomish group, 121, 32, 38, 39, 44, your meeting with McAuliffe is not at 12:45, so she's going to join you at 1:15. So you don't need to rush over there. And then the 24th, all of those Olympic Peninsula people that should actually get an award because I think you brought the most people. Yeah, good job. Fabulous. So you're on with Theringer at 3 o'clock in his office. So if you have any questions, yes. And yes. It's in Theringer's office, and I can get you that number if you come out here.
It's on the third floor.
Third floor, J-Lob. But if you meet me out here, I can get that for you. And I think I just want to highlight, no, everybody else, just look at your schedules. If you don't know who's in your group, if you feel uncomfortable, if you're worried, come and talk to me. I'll be out, or Becky. It can be nerve-wracking to meet with your legislators if you've never done it before. Don't be nervous. And if you are, contact us and we'll make sure that there's somebody with you. I think that's about it.
How many of you have met with your legislator before? Okay, good. Got a good organization.
Okay.
So
Any questions?
Yeah, questions about logistics?
Yes, sir.
Could I just address the parking a little bit better?
Of course.
I'm a volunteer at the Olympia VCB, and one of the things that's a very common question now is about parking on the Capitol campus. I usually ask people where they live, and I say park at home, because parking on the Capitol campus at this time of year is nil.
So my suggestion would be to leave your car wherever it is. I assume you have the little parking pass. Just leave it there. Walk over to Capitol, catch a dash bus, and go up to the Capitol that way. Because parking on the Capitol campus is really zero at this time of year. The other suggestion would be to go down to the farmers market. There's a public parking area there. You should put the pass in there. I think that'll clear you there. Take the dash bus from the farmers market traffic circle. That's the end of the line, and it takes you right back to the Capitol campus. The other thing, I invite you to come into the Visitor and Convention Bureau. Our office is right there in the corner of the Capitol campus. Say hello, get to know what we do, we get to know what you do. But anyway, just as far as parking goes, just leave your car where it is or move it to the farmers market. Forget about trying to park at the Capitol campus.
Yes. So I want to make sure that you guys, I want to just tag on one thing to what this gentleman said. There sometimes is parking in the South Capitol neighborhood area, but it is for an hour only. And I want to tell you that the City of Olympia is diligent in making sure that you only stay there an hour, and if you're there longer, you'll get a ticket. Yes. Anything else quickly? We'll be out in the lobby and you can ask us questions. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.